You gypped me. You have beer.
Yeah.
You might get some interesting conversation.
I don't know about this drinking once a week thing, Dan.
It's a problem.
Well, what happens is the night that I drink, I don't enjoy it.
Are you guys ready?
Uh-oh.
Yeah,
All right.
we're ready. We're at that right place of caffeination, relaxation. Welcome to Power of the Tribe podcast. My name is John Connors. I'm the host, and I'm also the founder of Connors Martial Arts here in Norwood, Massachusetts. We teach Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, Muay Thai kickboxing, and mixed martial arts. And Power of the Tribe podcast is about the power of the tribe. If you're looking to make a major change in your life, you're looking to lose weight, get in shape, gain confidence, become the badass that you should be, then find the right tribe. It can only help you. And I'm here with my co-host, Dan Robin. How you doing, Dan?
Good. How you doing, John?
Awesome. So what country have you come back from now? He's always traveling. He's international bon vivant.
Did we already mention Paris? Or
I think we talked. He was in Japan.
Oh, yeah.
And then, Paris.
D.C. That's not a country.
It's not, but it's exciting, I guess. Yeah.
It's different.
So have you been traveling?
I have not. I'm
Awesome.
purposely trying
Good.
not to for a little while.
Good. You're kind of irritating me having this wonderful life.
I think I'm irritating everybody. Every time I have to be like, I can't do it. I'm going to be in Paris. Like, what? Weren't you just in
so
Japan?
annoying.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's annoyed.
Well, we have a special guest today. So Patrice Inda is a student of mine. Patrice, get that microphone right close to you, man. How you doing today, bud?
Pretty good. How's everybody today?
Good. So, that's how you pronounce your last name, Inda. Is
Yes,
that correct?
That's correct.
Awesome. So, Dan, you know Patrice, do you?
A little bit. You
Yeah.
were around for I kind of was gone from the gym, not my main time at the gym. I came back for a cup of coffee,
Yeah.
and Patrice was around for that.
Right.
And so we kind of crossed paths a little bit.
Well, Patrice is one of my favorite students, and not just because he came in here for the podcast, but as you see, he has just this nonstop positive attitude. He's almost always in a good mood, a little bit like you, Dan. No, maybe the polar opposite, but
except good mood instead of bad mood.
right. That's what I meant. Yeah, exactly.
Similar, other than the quality of the mood.
And he just is always smiling, and he's a very lovable guy and a great student.
Thank you.
And he has a really interesting story that I thought you should hear and our audience should hear.
Yeah, and I've never heard it.
Awesome.
Don't know anything.
I've heard it, but it's still good. But I think you're going to like it.
Thank you.
So, Patrice, I wanted to start with that. And so, we often ask people how their martial arts career began and this type of thing. But I think we should get right to the exciting part of your story.
Right.
When, let me try to set it up a little bit for you, tee it up. So, you basically, something happened to you.
Right.
And what time of day was it?
So the catalytic event for me
Yeah.
was basically I had a stroke back in 2008.
2008.
Right. So you have to understand that I used to lift weights. I was into Taekwondo, so I thought of myself as a fit guy. So no
And
warning whatsoever.
you are a big, strong guy.
Thank you.
So you were in that mode where you felt indestructible.
Oh, God, yeah.
And you were a young guy, right?
Yeah.
2008. You must have been really young.
I was very young. I hadn't even, let me see, I would have been just on the, cups of being 40. And, the funny thing about it is I was a lot bigger than I am now. So, I mean, muscle-wise. And, I used to go in the gym with my buddies and we'd bench press, I was proud of my 240-pound bench press, you know what I mean? So, and...
getting that milestone of like the 245s on either side,
yeah.
the 225, that's an important milestone, right?
Oh yeah. That's like the standard in the gym. You aren't even bench pressing until you can make that, So I was all happy, pulling that off. We're high-fiving ourselves. I go home and I believe it was a Saturday morning, and I'm outside. My son, he's pretty young, but he had just started his basketball career. So I'm like, oh, let me go outside and show the little man a couple of things.
So is it the summertime or the
Summertime?
Yeah.
Beautiful. It's hot outside.
Yeah.
Sun's beaming down.
Yeah.
My son's running around outside. I'm like, hey.
And you felt totally healthy this whole time. Like there was
not-
no like you weren't suspicious. You weren't like I feel weird. Or,
Nothing at all. You have your normal. Before I would go to the emergency room, there'd be things, just normal crap. I ruptured an Achilles tendon. Drove myself to the emergency room with one leg hanging, dangling off to the side. My wife was like, "Yeah, that's you." So she was used to me being indestructible, and so was
Right.
my family. And I had taken on that persona myself too. I played rugby before, and I was heavily into taekwondo. So taking damage to me was just par for the course. I could shrug it off.
Right.
But
you were
then-
a man's man. Rugby and taekwondo.
Yeah.
That's pretty good, man.
Yeah. And I was proud of those. That was
Yeah.
my identity. I was the tough guy. So fast forward to 2008, and it was a Saturday, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, son, I'm jogging back and forth with him. He's pitching the basketball, and I go and I try to do a layup, and I come down, and I'm like, I feel kind of out of breath. This is unusual. And I kind of sit down on the stairs and said, son, you go ahead. And my son is like, oh, Dad, look at you, the old guy. And I'm like, I'm breathing pretty fast, and and I'm sweating. And then for me, all of a sudden, the lights around me just kind of shrank. And I'm like, I've got dark spots all around here, and I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then, my cognitive ability kind of slowed. So, my daughter, she's my EMT, as I call it. She shows up with the Band-Aid. Dad, here's the ice pack, here's the Band-Aid. So she runs and tells my wife, and my wife says, come on inside, you need to sit under the AC.
So at this point, sorry, are you just like, oh, I'm just tired, like I just
Right.
got overheated, or are you
Right.
scared? Which
And,
one is
your
that?
kids are young, right?
Right, they're very young. I mean, they're like,
They're like 5 years old?
yeah.
Was it 10 years ago?
Yeah, 10 years ago.
But are you scared right now, or are you like,
No,
I'm all right?
not
I'm
at all.
just- Okay.
Because even though I'm having the symptoms of a stroke, I didn't even know it because, I'm like,
Who would even think that at 40 years old? Right?
exactly, and I'm feeling, I'm still not in that realm. I'm like, I'm going to shrug this off. I just need to sit down. And a wife, she wasn't even alarmed. She's like, go sit under the AC. You'll be fine. But then I'm like, honey, I'm not getting better. I'm still feeling pretty sleepy now and, kind of weak. So the EMTs come and, they cart me off and I get to the emergency room. They look at me, and I think the deceptive part, like I'm trying to impart to you, is that, I'm a lot bigger. I was a lot bigger then. I was rough, tough looking. They're like, oh, do you play football? And then, they get all the questions, and they're like, take these meclizines, which is for vertigo, and go home. Went home. And, for 3 days, I'm unbalanced. I can't, I'm holding on to different walls just to get him from spot to spot. So I had actually been having a stroke for 3 days.
Wow.
And
so you probably grew up with that idea of like, we don't complain.
right.
Like, if there's something bothering you, just limp and walk it off.
Rub
right?
some dirt on it. You'll be
yeah,
fine. Drink some water. You're good. You're just dehydrated. So then now, fast forward to 3 days later, and my wife comes home, and it's lunchtime, and she's like, "Honey, you don't look so good." I was like, "Yeah, honey, I'm half awake. Just put my food over there." And then she leaves, and she leaves my phone next to me. For whatever reason, I don't know why she left my phone next to me. And I wake up to go eat my lunch, and I realize I can't feel my left side. And then I'm like, oh crap. Now,
that's your
the only
first, oh,
time,
crap.
That's the only time I was ever really scared. So I hop up. I'm like, great. I've got to call her. Something really is going wrong. And I fall on the floor. Whole left side's gone. Now, let me tell you, with the symptoms of a stroke, your cognitive ability goes out the window. I couldn't remember how to dial 911. But my wife, she left. I could recognize her name, so I hit redial on my cell phone, and I'm like, "Honey, I got problems. I can't move." She kind of suspected. She's pretty savvy. I call her Dr. Mom. She's like, "Stay on the phone with me," and she called the state police, and they're great. So they call Randolph Police Station Fire Department, and they just like, "Yeah, just get to the door." So I kind of like limp all the way to the door. And it's almost like, the movies. You open the door, and there's a fireman standing there. He's got his axe ready to beat down the door, and, everybody, I just literally fall into everybody's arms. So I spend the next week or so in ICU. And for you guys to understand, I had to learn to walk and talk again. Left side of my face is where any deficits I currently have, only my wife knows them. But, every once in a while I get cramps on my left side, but this whole side was gone. I had to learn to walk again.
How long did that take you?
6 months.
6 months.
At least.
Wow.
Just to get myself back to where I could say I'm speaking. I walked with a cane for a long time.
And you know what? For our listeners, I would never have guessed this. Like, I've seen him move on the mat, very athletic guy. Would never would guess that. That's where you were coming from.
Yeah, I was on a walker, and you have to understand, for me.
Where was your head at? For like, were you depressed or scared or like in shock or or all these things? Or
let me tell you, considering that I'm an athletic guy and I love Taekwondo, martial arts was something that was close to my heart. I'm devastated. I'm like, the first thing that came into my mind was like, I'm never going to be able to kick a punching bag again. I can't balance. If I close my eyes even now, I become very discombobulated. So, and part of, it's your inner ear thing that, that happens where the brain, because right now I've got a part of my brain that's dead. I got brain damage, but you wouldn't know it because the other side of my brain, apparently they said, would take over and learn stuff for me. Right. Mm-hmm. So for whatever reason, it began to, and I remember I was in ICU, and I got up and I suddenly decided that I'm not going to be that guy on a cane. Okay, martial arts taught me something. I know I can beat this. So, I went into my head and, I did my Zen thing and decided in my brain that I'm going to focus and I'm going to mental my way out of this. And I really think that was the first time I started to come back from whatever it was. That was the beginning. It's a long, hard road. But I think that was the beginning of my journey to get back.
You made a decision that you were going to do this.
Right. And the journey that brought me to Jiu Jitsu was I knew that no matter how good I was at Taekwondo, I had my problems with Taekwondo a while back. There were things about it that I felt just were lacking. There was no groundwork. You have to understand the Gracies, when they came over and started winning the UFC, I kind of was like, wow, that's the church. I got to get in on whatever it is they're doing. So I always thought I'd be augmenting my Taekwondo with that. Mm-hmm. Not that would now be the martial art that I could get to, because if you can't balance, for Taekwondo and stuff like that, you're challenged. I was never going to be that fast again. Already you get declining speed when, you hit your 40s, but you start to compensate with being a little more savvy, being a bit more tricky.
Set up things.
Right.
Yeah.
Those things were not there anymore for me. And with the brain damage, and I lost things. My left side was just like, I never did Taekwondo before. Everything was now being right orientated, but, that left me, I knew there was a weakness in that. No matter, all the, you can come back, you can do this, I go to the gym and, people would be, yeah, we'll spar light with you. But everybody knew that this side was my blind side. And for me, that was dangerous because I was like, this is not the martial art for me anymore. I need something else.
And how long had you trained in Taekwondo?
I love Taekwondo. I trained it since I was 16 years old. So you're talking 20-something years.
Wow.
So, a lot of the stuff, even with now doing Jiu Jitsu, when I tell John, he's made my Taekwondo better, is I'd learned a lot of things and ingrained them in my muscle memory, but I didn't realize that process and how that gets ingrained because, you're doing Taekwondo, you're young, your body is able to do things easily. It's only as I got older, now suddenly that became so much more important because I don't have all the faculties that I had before. So now whatever I have left, I have to nurture that and, I don't have time to waste and I've got to basically utilize that as best I can.
Are you not supposed to take shots in the head now because of the...
No, I take shots in the head, so I'm good.
But you're not supposed to.
I guess so. But
did the doctor advise you to go easy or just say live your life?
He said live my life. Well, here's the thing. It depends on the doctor you speak to. You've got doctors. A neurologist will tell you, no, any type of shots to the head will kill you. And then my one of the specialists told me, he said, look, you have no more danger than anybody else who would typically take a shot to the head. Do you want to be more careful? Yeah. You're not going to sit there and say, I'm going to start a career in boxing. You know what I mean? but no more than anybody else. So as long as I'm careful and learn to protect myself, and that's really what it's interesting that you say that, because now I realize that since I can't rely on I need to control the kind of blows and stuff that comes in. It became more important for me to switch to something that would be more useful for me in my current condition.
Right.
Hence jiu-jitsu.
Now, let me ask you this, Patrice. Did you notice, or did your wife report to you any differences maybe in your personality or your outlook in life?
So I was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for a long time.
After the stroke?
After the stroke.
So you had some volatility in your personality.
I'm not the same person. She says that when we first got married, I'm there, but the balances and stuff, the surety that I had before, the confidence has changed, because now I realize my mortality maybe. Secondly, it's
feel more vulnerable.
Yeah. And that in itself translates into anxiety. So I'm still on a lot of medications. One of the medications I was happy to get rid of was I had high blood pressure. That went out the window. And the reason for the high blood pressure, I never even realized I had it, because I had normal blood pressure right up until the stroke. Until this time, they really haven't discovered why I had it. So they just chalked it up to one of those mysteries, And that's
always comforting.
I'm like, come on, you guys, So they're like, well, I said, so what's my risk of it happening again? They're like, we don't know. It may never happen again. It just may be. They said my blood changed at that given moment for some reason. They like, did you do cocaine or did you smoke crack on that day? I'm like, yeah, right. Come on. But after they rule out a lot of the what they think might have been catalysts for it, they were like, okay, fine. It's just one of those things. Maybe you just had a clot that broke loose somewhere and ended up in the wrong spot, and boom, stroke. And
what about your sort of worldview or life's philosophy or anything? Did that change after this event? Do you look at the world in a different way now? How so?
Patience. I didn't have as much. Well, there's certain things I don't have patience with right now. And I would say not taking advantage of the things you have, because one thing I learned in the blink of an eye can be taken away from you. So go for it now.
Go for it now.
Yeah,
right.
Just get on the journey, whatever path you need to do, and do it.
Take some risks. Right.
And then other things.
Time is finite, right? Yeah.
Right. Because I'm young and indestructible, and now I'm more.
That is funny, right, Dan? Did you feel that way when you were younger too? That I got all the time in the world. I can just piss away my whole 20s and then get down to living my actual life, right?
Well, I was going to say some of it is just you reach an age where you're like, wait, I don't have forever,
right,
to do these things. Especially something like a martial art where it might take 10 years to get good, and you're like, all right, 10 years, how old am I going to be in 10 years? Like, that's, it starts, and if you're in your 20s, you're like, in 10 years I'll still be a young, strong guy, or the age of professional athlete.
I think when you're in 20s, you do feel almost immortal, that you're going to live forever, right?
Yeah.
Most of us, I think, feel that way.
Or you don't literally, but you
kind of feel it, though, right? You act that way, right? You're in no big hurry.
Someone said it somewhere around our age, and I don't know if it's happened with me yet, but you start, instead of thinking all these, thinking how old you are, you start thinking about how much time I have left.
Oh, right.
Switches from your past to how much time do I have?
Much sand is left in the hourglass, right?
But I think anything like a stroke like that will triple the effect of it, right? You're suddenly like, wait, I really, you really have that evidence in front of you that something can come end it,
right.
You don't know. You might
and I
just
better
not
get
have
after
forever.
it. Yeah.
Right. And that, of course, solidified my career path for me, where I was like, okay, I got these goals and milestones I want to do, and I keep preaching to my kids. My kids are like, oh, God, Dad, stop already. You got all these things you want to do, and, your options become less as you get older. And then, if health and stuff, you look at me, it might be my genetics, and, you don't know what you could be doing. And by the time you hit 45, look at me. And
employers start looking at you very differently, I think, when you're 45 and older.
Right.
Yeah. So you got to be aggressive and make it happen for yourself. Yeah.
And another thing too for me is I started wanting to hide the fact that I had a stroke, because I didn't want that to become my identity.
Right. That's very interesting. You don't want to be the stroke guy.
No, I don't want to, because then everybody starts they start bubble wrapping you. You know what I mean?
Right.
And kind of like when I joined Jiu Jitsu, my entire extended family was kind of like, oh my God, what are you doing? And kind of like the question you asked, didn't your doctor say that you could possibly have a heart attack? I'm like, guys, I didn't have a heart attack, I had a stroke. What's the difference? And suddenly having to educate everybody and telling them that what I do is no more dangerous than if I went jogging, took up jogging, you know what I mean? That's stressors.
Yeah, I mean, I think I talked about that when we had Pedro on the podcast. Pedro lost something over 100 pounds, and I like to tell people about that who are interested in getting at a lower weight, just so they can get some inspiration and perhaps some advice from him and some direction. But I never want to start creating his identity as the guy that lost 100 pounds, because of course he's so much more than that. Right. That's just one little adventure on his journey, and I can see why you feel the same way too. I mean, it's an important event in your life. Right. A near fatal experience.
Right.
But and it may be a turning point in some sense, but you did a lot of interesting stuff before that, and you're doing a lot of interesting stuff now. So yeah.
And it was kind of interesting too, because I went right back to work maybe 4 months after the event, and I really didn't like the fact that everybody would see me walk around in a cane, and they would get up for me, or they would hold the elevators for me. I appreciated it. But these were things that I could do for myself historically before, or I would try to balance a tray with a cane. You know what I mean? I'm like, when did I become the cane guy? And then you have to understand, I wasn't supposed to drive, so because I had no balance, I had no depth perception. It was all off. But I was like, screw this, I'm going to drive. And I hopped in my car. My wife was at work, I remember, because she used to hide my keys, so I got the spares. And I hopped in the car, and she was pissed because I literally had to drive sideways, leaning over on the corner, because just to get my balance back, to actually actuate myself in the center of the road. And I'm driving like this all the time. Like, I hope nobody really tries to honk me or do anything, to disturb my balance. But I did it. And then I drove back, and then I was like, okay, I'm putting on the car. I'm never getting back in it again. But I did it. And, where walking 100 meters was a challenge. But I did it. And then I did stairs. I mean, I couldn't navigate stairs. Going downstairs, I'd be like, if there was a fire drill, I had to be the guy who had to wait for the fireman to come get you on your floor, because, I was 6 stories up. I was like, this is me? Really? I couldn't really save myself if there's a fire,
That's an awful feeling, I bet.
It's to help. If it was gradual, and I got there gradually because of old age, maybe I'd have been a bit more accepting.
Oh, that's interesting. So you sort of had a taste of old age foisted upon you at a younger age.
Right.
But I've thought about this before, that people that have some sort of traumatic physical injury, and I've heard this from someone before, that you had 40 years of not being like the stroke guy, and
right.
You don't want to suddenly be that guy. The person I talked to was in a wheelchair,
right.
And they're like, I was for 45 years, I was not a wheelchair guy, and now everyone's like, oh, there's that wheelchair guy, and it's a real change in your identity. And in your case, like the wheelchair guy, he has to be in the wheelchair, but for you, you don't necessarily have to be, so when you came to the gym, you made the decision, it sounds like, that you didn't want to be, I'm the guy here you have to go light with, or you have to.
Right.
And you made incredible progress in your physical capabilities.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was key. I felt that, I'd always leaned upon martial arts. My journey initially to martial arts had always been, I want to get better. That was always the underlying theme for whatever I did. I was an asthmatic, and I think maybe this had something to do with I was an asthmatic kid, in my early years, and the technology now that's around to deal with, allergies like asthma is not the same as it was back then. So you took a pill that knocked you down, and, you try to do, some sprays, and maybe you'll start to breathe. But there was, jokes about the asthmatic kid who's, he's thin, he's skinny, he's unathletic. So I fought through that. So it was always strength of will that would make me, I wasn't going to be the asthma guy. So I guess that might have carried over. I wasn't going to be the stroke guy.
Very interesting. So you're using your will to not only strengthen yourself physically, but also to really captain the course of your identity.
Right.
Which is really interesting. Identity, I find, is so tricky, because we can have an identity for ourselves,
right,
but often we're at the mercy of what the audience is looking at us, and they're they're coming up with an identity for us, no matter who we are, or what we're about, or what we're doing. So I can see how it does take a real strength of mind to say, this is my identity, even if they don't see it yet, even if they're seeing something else. This is me. This is my identity. Yeah, I think that's really interesting.
Right. And in your case, there's this straightforward physical aspect where it's sort of in the gym,
right,
where it's like there's actual outcome. It's not just an abstract, how do you see me? It's physically, how hard do I want them to come at me, right? Because if you said to everyone, hey, you could have come in and said, hey, I had this event, I have a stroke, I'm not supposed to go that, and then everyone would have gone, you could have moved things that way. You could have deliberately used it.
And actually, I'm sure it was the opposite. He's a big, strong guy.
Yeah.
So you do seem like the type of guy that, well, I really couldn't hurt him, so I'm just going to give him 110%. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's your like you could have actually been like, I want to use this for everyone to go lighter with me, as opposed to like, I definitely don't want that. Like that's a straightforward choice.
But and that's funny you mentioned that, but I guess it's part of that identity, because not wanting that to happen, I wanted you to come at me hard, because that was a reaffirmation that I'm still alive. I'm still capable. I can still, I still have room to progress and grow.
I think this idea of identity is so powerful. I find that myself now. So I eat very healthy, and up and started this year. Before this year, I ate 98% healthy. So if somebody saw what I ate, they'd say, this guy is a freak. He only eats super healthy. And then I went from the 98% to the 100%, and I lost about 12 pounds of body fat, and it made a huge difference. It's very interesting. That last 2% gave me about a 25% return, 30% return.
Right.
But part of it was my identity. So in my mind, if something was processed food, I would say, yeah, I don't eat that.
Right.
So I don't have to make a decision, because my identity is a person that only eats whole natural food, meat, leaves, vegetables, and fruit, or whatever. So, I the way I would think about it is, a killer whale in the ocean eats seals and other fish or whatever the hell it eats. It doesn't eat cookies and cake and Twinkies. It doesn't need willpower to not eat it, because it has an identity.
Right.
And the challenge with the human brain is we have such a powerful imagination. We can create all kinds of identities for ourselves and could open ourselves up to so much. So when I had that identity of like, no, I don't eat that. That's not food to me. That was really helpful in eating healthy and resisting any kind of temptation of food that wasn't going to serve me. So I really do think that identity is very powerful.
So I got to think about it. Since I eat about 98% unhealthy, I think maybe the issue.
Well, Dan, I think we've come to the conclusion that you come from another planet. I mean, the guy doesn't work out, eats anything, and he looks like the fittest guy in the room.
But
crazy, right?
Right.
But I'm just thinking that. But is it? I never thought of it. Do I have an identity? Like, well, that is what I eat when I see like a tub of chocolate chip cookies. I'm like, that's me. And then like a salad, I'm like, that's not me. That's not what I do.
Yeah.
So maybe I need to change that to be like switch identities, food eating identities.
Well, it's funny because even before, after my stroke, the things that changed so much is like, salad for me was something that food ate. You know what I mean? So
something your food ate.
My food ate that. So I must be getting the nutrients somehow. So now I have to switch to vegetables, and you have to realize too that even though I had the mentality that I'm going to change this, that didn't happen in 6 months. 6 months was when I was able to tentatively start doing stuff. It was more of a 2-year journey, and the depression, there's a lot of ups and downs in between. Because you go from being what you think in your mind is a specimen, then your activity level drops dramatically. You're just basically trying to learn to walk again and stuff. So you can't jog, you can't lift weights. I mean, I remember I was like, I'm going to start lifting weights again, and I have a 25-pound dumbbell that I couldn't pick up. You know what I mean? And it was like, wow. And I think, I wouldn't even tell my wife this. At the time, I was almost in tears. You're a grown man who hasn't cried in over how long, and I'm like, damn, this is who I am now.
You have to completely rebuild yourself, right? Like,
right.
That's fascinating. So you're faced with the physical evidence that your identity is profoundly changed. You can't pick up a 25-pound dumbbell.
Right.
But through your will, you said, that's not me.
Right.
I am this other person, and I'm at least becoming that.
Right.
So I think it's interesting. You have to do that. You have to have in your mind's eye your real identity, but you also have to be realistic. Like, I can't pick up this 25-pound dumbbell, so I'm on a journey to that identity. It's a journey of becoming who I really am.
Right.
Yeah.
And fast forward to jiu-jitsu, I think what drew me to it was because there was this profound, leverage and, using your body effectively, and take what you got and make that and multiply strength using technique. And somehow on a cerebral level that spoke to me. And I was like, wait a minute, so I'm always going to be a warrior in my mind. So I have to learn to fight differently. And it's not even just, not just the physicality of like throwing punches and blows, but how I navigate the world. If I'm going to get back to be what I consider myself as a warrior, I have to find different ways to be that person again. So, do I need tools to lift the 25-pound? What else can I employ that'll get me to do the things that I want to do? Because my mind is still whole.
That makes a lot of sense. I can see that. If you really study the jiu-jitsu the way you should study it, it's exactly as you described. You're learning how to be efficient and effective and find the proper leverage in any position or movement. Right. And you essentially had to do that just to get up and walk and get rid of your cane.
Right.
Like, how am I going to move my body in the right way so I can navigate these stairs or drive my car terribly when I shouldn't be?
Right. My wife's still not.
I would think it would actually be great therapy in that. What else matches jiu-jitsu in terms of being aware of body position, moving your body, and it's got to be lighting up your brain, right? To be like, to be using your body a lot more than most people
in a
would ever
deliberate,
use it.
conscientious way where you're trying to be effective.
Yeah, all those
and
pathways
efficient.
have to be getting lit up the whole time you're training, I would guess.
Now, I'm curious about this because I've only known you post your stroke. You seem to be a profoundly positive person to me. Right. And I know I only see you a few times a week.
Right.
Were you always as positive as this?
I have always been a positive person.
Yeah.
I've always been lighthearted. My wife, it's funny you mentioned that. It's just, and she looked at me the other day and she was like, "You're finally coming back to the person you used to be." It was a rough, journey for the last 3 or 4 years after your stroke. And she's a saint, because she didn't give me the impression that anything had changed. But, I'd be grouchy or I'd have mood shifts, or people would meet me and be like, "What's wrong with him? He's not the same person." And she would be, she'd be my pit bull. She'd be like, "No, of course he's not the same person. He had a stroke. That person's gone." And then I would hear that and be like, "That person's gone," and that itself shook me too because of like I was on a journey to get that person back and to get back on the road that I knew I was supposed to be on.
Right, you're like, I'm not gone. Right.
I'm just buried deep in here somewhere.
Well, let me ask you this. So, do you think you're a better version of Patrice than pre-stroke Patrice?
I think I am.
I think you have to be, right?
Yeah, you have to be. I mean, life is nothing. It gives you lessons, and where some of the lessons we learn, and the lesson that I learned is that I've got to seize the moment. I mean, a lot of times, even in my training, when I feel like I'm holding back, and that would be something that I'm working on now. That's my next journey, not to hold back, to recognize those opportunities and to reach out and take them, because even you find out about yourself and who you are in jiu-jitsu, your character, and I begin to realize I'm a very thoughtful person in my character, and it's more explicit in how I do my jiu-jitsu. There's nothing wrong with being cerebral, but you also have to learn when the opening happens, take it.
Seize the moment.
It's terrible for me too. I think all of my coaches always yell, like, you stop, like you're thinking, and I sometimes definitely fall into that where you got to go sometimes.
It's very funny.
Instead of being in a position and thinking about what should I do, and then sometimes you're thinking and then it's too late.
Right,
it's too late.
Yeah.
So it's a character trait that's a strength for both of you guys. You're conscientious guys, so you do a lot of thinking. What's going on? What's the consequences of what I'm doing? What does it mean for this person over here, or this other person over there? And all of that makes you a person that people want to be friends with because you're conscientious, and it improves your life in so many ways. But in some moments of jiu-jitsu, it works against you because you're being too considerate, where you should just be, boom, gone, moving, going. Yeah.
So, and the biggest thing about when you ask, am I a better version of myself? I believe that nothing else. It was a terrible event, but it forged my will. It reaffirmed things I already knew about myself. You think you're tough, is what, I tell you, I bench press this, I'm a tough guy, but you begin to understand what tough really means.
Right. Talk about lifting weights. That's a pretty big weight that got put on you, man. Holy cow.
It was bigger than anything, this was, now try to lift a milk carton, and steady it, you can, when you have to learn that I can't use my knife and fork the way I used to now. Everything's on one side. But then I said, to hell with that. It's not only going to be on one side. This side is going to contribute somehow to this other side too, and being forever conscious to make sure that I employ my left side to do what my right side's doing. So that became a discipline on its own.
That is so fascinating. So think about that, Dan. I think what Patrice is saying is that the physical manifestations of some change in my body, starts in my nervous system, which starts in my will, my decision for something to happen. Like if you didn't make that decision to completely recover, you probably couldn't recover the way that you had.
Right.
I see it, and let alone the stroke, like with my parents' generation, a lot of, inevitably with age, you see deterioration, and some people fight it, and they exercise and they do their stretching or whatever they're supposed to do, and a lot of people just do not. They just
slide off.
They just slide off. They just, they can even get advice. You need to do this, you need to do that, and they just don't. They don't make that decision. So it's not.
It's all about challenging yourself physically and mentally, right? If you're learning new things, I see that where people stop learning new things at some age. Where well, I've gotten through high school and college. I've got my job. I have my kids. I've learned everything I need. I'm done.
Right.
And it's just awful.
But then if a life event knocks you down, then now you realize that life has not stopped teaching you something. And that's the position I was put in. I had to become a lifelong learner.
Right. Yeah, you were forced to learn just to be able to walk up the stairs.
Right.
We've talked on here and about for getting into the gym, but in general, getting out of your comfort zone or shaking things up. And that was like violently forced upon you. Like, do you know what I mean? Like it's sort of, we talked about it with we weren't talking about any sort of having a stroke or any sort of accident. We were saying just how do you get off the couch? How do you get yourself going? And this was like thrust on you, where you really had to.
You were thrown off the couch and they threw the couch on top of your head.
Yeah, exactly.
And burned down the house around you. Well, and it's funny you mentioned that because at that point a decision was forced upon me. Who was I going to be? Was I going to be the physically challenged person? And there's people in my family who've had strokes and other life events, and that became their identity. And you go to the family barbecue and they put them in the corner and they're not drooling in the corner, but they're half asleep, and everybody's like, they whisper around you, don't disturb him, he had that life event, and all the kids would be like, oh, if you don't eat all your vegetables, you become like Uncle Pete, you know what I mean? So, and I was like, no, I'm not going to be Uncle Pete.
To John's point, that's where it all starts, right? The decision. Like, am I going to be that or not?
Right.
That's a miracle if you think about it. You make a decision, you literally start changing the gray matter in your brain, and you change your nervous system, and then you change your body. Because I imagine if you didn't do that, your body probably would have atrophied. You would have lost muscle mass and everything else. So basically, one way or the other, you're going to have a physical manifestation of your decision. So if you decide to throw in the towel, then that's going to have a physical manifestation. And if you decide like you did, is I'm coming back, baby.
Yeah.
And then you're going to see that as well. That's fascinating. Wow. And it is about getting outside your comfort zone. Dan, I don't know if I told you, I haven't competed in jiu-jitsu since April of 2000, and I'm competing again. So I'm going to compete in September and then all of next year. and it's very exciting.
All right, Coach. Yeah.
But you're out of your comfort zone for sure, right? What,
Yeah.
almost 20 years?
Yeah, a little bit. And I was thinking about that. When was the last time you were nervous about something? Maybe like the first podcast episode or something?
I wasn't too nervous.
Again, he's from a different galaxy. I don't know why I'm even asking these questions.
But I don't know. I'm sure there's something.
But I think it's a sign that you're on the right path. If imagine living every day where you're never nervous about anything you're about to do or have any doubt. That can't be the right way, right? Like, so when you're having a little bit of, I don't know how this is going to go, that has to be a sign that you're going in the right direction. You're on the right path.
You know what's so interesting that you talk about competing, and right after my first competition, I don't know if you remember it, and my wife had sent out a Facebook post for everybody that I understand your journey. You have to understand, I never ever thought I'd be able to stand in a competition again. Because when I was doing Taekwondo, there was, I was in Colorado when I was really heavily into it, and there was their version of a USC competition, which I was like, one day I'm going to go to that. And I was always with the identity to keep my body whole, because one day I was going to go and compete in that competition. I believe it's called the Sabaki or something like that, and it was pretty big. And one of the things was like, I'll never be able to do that. So when I finally was able to compete, just the fact that I could get to a competition and stand there, win or lose, I'm here.
Right.
You know what I mean? That itself was, for me, was the biggest medal ever.
Right. And if you didn't jump on that opportunity to compete, it might have passed and never presented itself again. Who knows? You might have had another stroke, or something might have happened.
Right. So every time I hit the mat, and for me, is a physical reaffirmation that I'm alive. And I think that's why a lot of times when you say, you're always so happy, because I'm in my happy place.
Right.
I get to jiu-jitsu, and it's like that euphoria is like, I can do this. If I can just sit here and do jiu-jitsu all the time, that would be fun. I can't physically do it.
And you're framing it in the right way. You're looking at it as, this is something I get to do, and I get to do it now, and who knows what the future will bring. It's very funny. What I do sometimes in the kids' class is, the kids might suddenly lose focus a little bit, and there's more than halfway through class, and now they're not really trying that hard. Yeah. And then I'll say to them, listen, you have 19 minutes left in class, and then I'm throwing you out of here, and you're not going to be able to do jiu-jitsu. And suddenly the thought of like losing the opportunity to jiu-jitsu reinvigorates them, and then they start training real hard. So if that framework of like, I may never have the opportunity to do this again, really, I think can work and give you great energy and jump you in there. And it's the truth. Yeah. It's not BS, you know.
Just a mindset, which I never had, but I have 1 hour to learn this, or I have 1 hour to learn today, or I have 3 hours this week to learn jiu-jitsu.
Or you come into class and you have that hour or whatever it is, and you may not get another, because who knows what could happen. Yeah. The world could end, you could die, something catastrophic could happen, and it puts you in the place where you have the ultimate gratitude to have that experience, and you probably have the best experience possible going into it with that attitude.
The funny thing about it is, I guess how I first got into martial arts was that you watch Van Damme and you watch all the the movies. You want to do the splits. You want to be that martial artist. And that itself, my wife always laughs. She's like, "You're gonna find that old Asian guy on the mountain who you'll come up and say, Sensei,
Mr. Miyagi,
show me the meaning to life and the perfect kick, and something profound would be told to you, and you'd come back and you would be able to destroy everybody around you with it." And I guess I was always chasing that, and even the fact that would now be put forever out of my reach was, I was like, no, this is a dream I've always had. I will find some way. And jiu-jitsu, what brought me to it was, everybody was like, they had their pajama roll, whatever you want to call it. There was always derogatory things that they put
the Taekwondo group.
Right.
Yeah, they're protecting their territory a little bit, so they're going to disparage jiu-jitsu a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
You don't want to roll on the ground. You want to be a man and stand and exchange blows, and and I wanted to understand what this was, because it was, especially when I watched the UFC and they were destroying everybody with it. And then, this was, of course, pre my stroke. So it was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to get into jiu-jitsu. But, I'm faithful to Taekwondo, you know what I mean? And, your sensei, he would frown, no, this is not what we do. You stand and fight. So, you try to be faithful to that. But I found out that, I couldn't do Taekwondo afterwards, and there would be a lot of, schools of thought that would disagree. But I just knew there was a difference. And then I found that, hey, if necessary, if I'm on the ground and I can fall down well, because I had a stroke, I know I can get to the floor. If I can keep fighting from then on, that itself made sense to me. And then, fast forward to when I walk into your gym, I found a whole subculture I didn't know existed. And, all of a sudden it was speaking in a language that the techniques reaffirmed something in my mind that I think I always knew was lacking in Taekwondo. Not to disparage it, Taekwondo, because Taekwondo taught me a lot of things too, but it seemed as if Jiu-Jitsu answered a lot of the questions that were already swirling in my mind. And then, being in your gym, it opened me up to a culture that I never knew existed. Anybody outside, when you become a creature of Jiu-Jitsu, as Hickson would say, you suddenly realize, like, wow, there's a camaraderie here that we don't have in other martial arts. And I was heavily into my gym. I'd be there late. My instructor would be there while I'm kicking the bag and, doing what Van Damme was doing. Put the punching bag on your shoulders and run around the gym 50 times, to prove how strong you are. But, here it's like, wait a minute. I'm understanding biomechanics. I'm understanding leverage. And these are all things that you need, whether you're standing and kicking or lying down and throwing or sweeping. It's all important. And then I watched Hickson's fights, because now I was a junkie from then on. And, in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, I can't do Taekwondo again, but what about Jiu-Jitsu? All right, I can't do this again. What about wrestling? And then none of it seemed to make sense. And all the avenues brought me back to Jiu-Jitsu. And then I was like, okay, fine. I'm going to pull the trigger. I'm going to look for Jiu-Jitsu school. My wife laughed at me. She's like, look, you just had a stroke. How many years ago? You know that you're weak on this side. You know these guys are big monsters, because all she saw was Jiu-Jitsu was UFC or MMA. And you tell somebody you're doing Jiu-Jitsu, you mean MMA? You know what I mean? And she's like, I don't want to see you bloodied. I don't want to. I said, honey, that's not what I'm going to do. And then, when I went to the gym the first time, I took the trial class you gave me. And I came on, I was excited. My wife's checking me for bruises and cuts. Like, are you bleeding anywhere? Did they hit you?
I'm always interested in that first day in the gym. So I'm actually curious about what you thought. Like, because for me, that was nerve-wracking. I guess I was nervous then. Like, you walk in and you're sort of, it was different time too, where I just had no idea what it was like. I was like, are people just going to really beat me up in here? Like, I didn't know. I didn't know. Right. So you walk in, and even like your gym, now you know everyone, and it just seems really peaceful. But I sometimes try to look at it through the eyes of someone that's new. There's scary looking people in there. Not scary to us because we know them, but like objectively, there's like big tattooed, strong guys in there, and so I'm wondering, when you first walked in, not only are you walking into this gym for the first time, but you also, coming in with your wife saying, be careful, you shouldn't do it. Like,
right.
Did you come in nervous, or did you come in like, I'm going to be fine? Or did you know anything? Were you unsure? So, or, were you reassured by John, or how to play out for you?
So one, I was reassured by John, for one. And two, I was of the mindset, dozens of guys have made this journey before me. They survived it. So there's got to be some way for you to survive whatever your first day is going to be. So I walk in. My wife, of course, she's like, honey, it looks very stark. You know what I mean? And I was like, honey, this is it. This is a man's gym. I see tattoos. I see guys with biceps, guys look like they're sweating. I said, this is what I need. And maybe if it was, pre-stroke, I might have said, no, I want, I want the soft gym, where we'll just continue to do our Taekwondo. If I don't see elements of that, then yeah. But I knew that whatever comeback I had to do was going to be a hard journey for me. So I came up with the mindset I needed the roughest, toughest group in order to join, to challenge me, to push myself beyond my comfort zone. And two things happened. One, every preconceived idea was shattered. The guys are tough, and it is, you know, a rough and tough gym, but I wasn't abused in any way.
Yeah.
And the biggest thing I found was that everybody in the gym was very into trying to make sure I made this journey. The encouragement I've always heard from day one was that you can do this. You know, the belief that you can do this. And because I had that fire already kindled within me that I can do this, stay around long enough and let it change you. And that's what I needed. I needed that. I needed to be in an environment where there were people putting that into me as much as I was putting it into myself. Because, you know, there's also gyms out there, if you can't go to competitions and produce the results they want, you're dismissed. You come in, you know, you're the weekend warrior, but the real team's here. Everybody else is just to pay the bills. But there's none of that in my gym. And if nothing else, that's what's kept me coming back, because I really, really felt that if I stayed here and surrendered to the process, I was going to get good results. And it was always in the back of my mind. One day, God willing, there'll be a black belt in my future. But it took a while for me to pivot and realize that that's the journey to that black belt is just as important. And so the first step is crossing that threshold. And, you know, John has a sign above his, the entrance to the gym. The way to achievement or championship begins here, you know. And I look at that every single time I come in. And I say it, and I look back every time I leave the gym. And it reminds me to come back tomorrow.
That's awesome. I think what you've done is, and what I've come to believe is, we should commit to a goal, but often results are not completely in our control. But if we commit to the process that is likely to lead to the result, that's very important. Right. So I have a goal in mind. I have a process that I'm going to commit to and follow through with, and you described it as a journey. That's really what's in your control and what's important. And if you do that, whatever result you get is less important, because right. you're going to gain so much anyways. And as far as, I've always tried to eliminate any kind of hazing. For some reason, I can't stand that. Like, I just saw a little blip on TV. Oh, the NFL teams they humiliate the rookies. They they cut their hair.
Right, yeah.
I don't know why. I don't like that. It's like, this person is an athlete who's achieved like a certain level, and now we're going to cut their hair in a weird way. Right. It's something that's very primitive, and it's in our human behavior. I don't know if the purpose is maybe just to knock them down a peg so they feel closer to the group. I'm not sure why, but I was never a fan of hazing. I don't know why. I don't like it at all. Yeah.
I'm sorry. You reminded something I thought was funny. Is just last year, it was like the Cornell a cappella group got kicked off campus for hazing their. It just seems, because you're just saying like it seems to be in our like I sort of
maybe
felt like,
if you were some I
thought it'd be the last group that would ever do that, like
right.
the bunch of singers at Cornell like a cappella, and they were like brutally hazing.
I can see if you're preparing to go to war, we're gonna do some hazing just to roughen people and bring them together. But a cappella,
it's like, is that necessary? Like,
absolutely not.
Did you end up being like really devoted to the a cappella group because they hazed you? Like,
when it goes down, I want my a cappella group there for me. I want it ready when the shit goes down. Yeah, so silly, unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, you cut all hazing out, and I haven't seen any different. You know what I mean? There's no lack of devotion to the gym, or it doesn't seem.
I think in Jiu Jitsu, and we teach Jiu Jitsu, Muay Thai, and MMA. The challenge exists already.
Right.
You don't need to conjure up some way to make it harder for people.
And my suspicion's always been that people make up reasons like, oh, it makes you more devoted, and that makes you more, in the end you feel more a group. But I think it's after the fact, and really a lot of people just like doing it. They like shaving someone's head, or they like whipping someone with their belt, and they're just like,
an expression of sadism.
They're sort of like, you like kind of doing the mean stuff, and now you're making up the reasons why it was actually not a bad thing.
And they justify doing it because they went through it.
Right.
Right.
And they're somehow getting
that
revenge.
I could almost see. You're like, well, I got whip with a belt. Like now
Some places do that. Did you know that, Patrice? Like if you get your blue belt, you walk down between 2 rows of students who hit you with their belt. It's so wacky. When I got my blue belt, they did that.
Oh God!
But I liked it for some reason. I was totally into it. I took my jacket off. I was bare chested. I slowly walked down, and I was so exhilarated for getting the promotion that I felt absolutely no pain whatsoever.
Right.
So it was kind of fun, but I don't think everyone would feel that way.
Right.
And it does seem a little undignified.
You don't want to do it to someone
wacky,
that
right?
feels that someone hates it too.
Right.
You know,
Yeah. So strange.
And it's funny you mentioned that because for those who don't know what jiu-jitsu is or the culture, it can seem a little scary before you, when you see stuff like that. And, like you said, the first step is just walking to the gym. And, the first day I survived it, the test, and it was like, I felt good and it felt, okay, I can possibly do this. And then, the identity suddenly becomes, it switched from being, I'm a post-stroke guy to now I'm a jiu-jitsu guy. And I've watched people around me slowly accept that as well because they're like, well, you come back and, I've been to competition, I've done things normally. And my wife, I had a small injury. I call it small, but I had to have surgery. But, I've had surgeries before where, I ripped something in my ankle. But a lot of the injuries that occur, from what I see, is through ego. And I did it in a totally it didn't need to happen, and it was partly my fault. When I should have, I moved left when I should have moved right. I decided to not let go when I should have to hold on when I should have let go. So that is what I found is how you get injured. But once you let the ego go away, and like you said, you become part of the process. Now my identity has shifted. I'm a fighter, and John can tell you that a lot of times when he gets aggravated because I told you how to do this move, and the typical blue belt, we're like, is this what you mean, coach? And you totally screw it up. And he's like, I'm done, I gotta go home now. Because I'll strangle you with your belt. But suddenly you become, that becomes my identity now. And he's making me into a fighter regardless of my inclinations to resist that. Because there's also that we resist that which is hard because it's easier to stay where I'm at. It's comfortable. I can sit on the couch. I can go home after work. And my wife is like, you're off again to the gym? Are you really going to the gym? I'm like, yeah, honey, I'm going to the gym. You're telling me that you're going to work out with sweaty guys in 98-degree heat, and they're going to choke you. And we love it,
Well, my perception of you is somebody who trains consistently and deliberately and conscientiously. So, yeah, that's all I see is a real dyed-in-the-wool jiu-jitsu guy who's making great progress. So I don't, I didn't even know really the story until you filled me in at some point, but which I like better actually. I don't like to put people in a box when they come in. I like them to come in. I take everybody at face value and try to figure out where they are and what is their comfort zone and how can we get them a little bit outside of that. How can we help them grow and progress? And that's a very individual journey. Right. So yours is going to be different than the next student and so forth. So that's the way I really try to look at things. So I learned a lot today.
Thank you.
So one of the things I learned is if you make a decision with the power of your will, you can literally change your nervous system, your body. Right. You can control your identity, which is so important to your life. And the other is to seize the day, carpe diem. Right. Dan, do you know what carpe diem means?
It means seize the day.
It does. I studied 10 years of Latin to come away with that. Pretty much that. And a couple other things. Yeah.
Quid pro quo.
So that was awesome, Patrice. Thanks so much for coming in and telling us your story. Very inspiring.
Thank you.
And it's interesting that, the universe slammed you over the head and you responded, and good for you.
Thank you.
That's amazing. And I would tell people out there, don't wait for the universe to slam you over the head. If life is good, still go out there and take some risks because the clock is ticking. Life is going by, and you're not going to have the opportunities forever. So whatever you're thinking about doing, if there's some risk out there that you're considering taking, just take the risk.
Right.
Just go out there and do it. See what happens. So, do you have anything to add, Dan?
No, also, it's
Awesome.
a great story.
Unbelievable. Thank you so much, Patrice.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, you're awesome. Really love what you're doing, and you're an inspiration to me and to so many people. And so that's it for this podcast. And this is the Power of the Tribe podcast. My name's John Connors. I'm the founder and head instructor at Connors Martial Arts in Norwood. If you want to learn more about us, reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram, and we will help make your dreams come true. See you next week, guys.
Bye now.
See.
Awesome, man.
That's it. See, that was easy.